Good morning, everyone. Here in the House, we continue to get things done for the American people. For example, we've passed the first real entitlement reform since the 1990s, new tools to fight human trafficking, resources to combat veterans' suicides, and reforms to make our trade agreements better. This week, we see the President a bill that gets our veterans a permanent ID card to prove their service. And yesterday, we passed reforms to help more students get a good education no matter where they're from. And tomorrow, we'll pass the 21st Century Cures Initiative to get life-saving treatments for patients who need them. So our focus continues to be on the people's priorities. Iran, by all accounts, still isn't serious about abandoning its nuclear weapons program. When will the President and his negotiators stand strong? We cannot accept a deal that hands Iran billions of sanctions relief while allowing it to retain the capability to build a bomb almost immediately. Iran is a global menace. Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terror, and I think it's a pipe dream to think that the regime will ever be a responsible partner when it comes to Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. So I think it's time for the administration to come back to earth. On Monday, President Obama made a statement at the Pentagon just 24 hours before Secretary Carter's shocking admission that we're only training 60 Syrian fighters. He announced no new changes in our fight against ISIL. If nothing's going to change, I don't know how we ever expect to win. President Obama, I think, has to lay out a broad, overarching strategy to defeat and destroy these savage terrorists. I've outlined on a number of occasions what, in my view, an overarching strategy should look like. We should give our commanders on the ground more flexibility. We need to combat ISIL's use of social media, and we need to engage, not ignore, our longstanding allies. We only have one commander-in-chief at a time. However, it's his responsibility to lead this fight against ISIL. Lastly, on the issue of Benghazi and the work of the Select Committee, Secretary Clinton said, and I'll quote, "It is the fact that we have released all of the emails that have any government relationship whatsoever." Well, it just isn't true. She said that Sidney Blumenthal, quote, sent me unsolicited emails. That's not true either. And Secretary Clinton said, and I'll quote, "There's no subpoena regarding her email." That isn't true either. All these facts were uncovered by the Benghazi Select Committee, and they were uncovered despite the efforts of Secretary Clinton and the State Department to delay, derail, and stop this fact-finding investigation. As Chairman Gowdy said this week, Secretary Clinton had a statutory duty to preserve these records from her time in office. She had a legal duty to cooperate and tell the truth with congressional investigators requesting her records going back to 2012. Some 4 Americans lost their lives in this terrorist attack. The American people deserve the truth about what really happened. And Secretary Clinton and the State Department are prolonging this investigation. They need to stop dragging this out. They need to start cooperating and step up document production so we can get all the facts. Frankly, that's not too much to ask.
How is an amendment to preserve the Confederate flag at federal cemeteries added to an interior bill last night, especially with today being the day that South Carolina is taking down theirs?
Look, our members rightly tried to address the concerns yesterday in a way that was consistent with how the Obama administration has handled this issue. And I frankly supported the goal of trying to work with all the parties to address their concerns. But listen, we all witnessed the people of Charleston and the people of South Carolina come together in a respectful way to deal with, frankly, what was a very horrific crime and a difficult issue with the Confederate flag. I actually think it's time for some adults here in the Congress to actually sit down and have a conversation about how to address this issue. I do not want this to become some political football. It should not. And so I would expect that you'll see some conversations in the coming days.
Do you yourself think they should be at federal cemeteries, Confederate flags?
No.
Jared Huffman and the Democrats who did this put an amendment in an appropriations bill. What do you mean when you say it's become a political football? Because, as you know, some Southern members approached appropriators and leadership and indicated they would vote against the Interior bill with this amendment. What do you mean by political football? It seems like this was a regular order, was adopted by voice vote, and it was reversed. So how is it a political football?
Well, I just think that when you look at several weeks ago, there was a privilege resolution dropped, and then there were these amendments. I want members on both sides of the aisle to sit down and let's have a conversation about how to address what, frankly, has become a very thorny issue.
Can you tell us what does that conversation entail? What is this some sort of special committee, commission? Is it the House and Senate?
I have some ideas, and when I firm them up in my head, I'll let you know.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a little unclear here on what you're suggesting in your Iran talks. You have been consistently suspect of what's going on here, but if the United States pulls out, or there is no agreement, a lot of people say that is a path to war and is a far worse alternative. Are you thinking that if that's the route we go, that if we don't have an agreement, don't have a good agreement, then it's a route to military action against Iran because we don't have a framework with which?
No, I disagree with that entire notion. And the fact is that the administration has backed away from their own guidelines that they set up going into this, what they were trying to accomplish. And they've backed away from every one of them. And I'm not trying to stop any deal here. What I'm trying to do is stop a bad deal. Because a bad deal is going to, frankly, put in the hands of the Iranians a nuclear weapon. I'm opposed to that.
And to clarify, though, but when you say that you disagree with the notion here, what is the alternative? Why wouldn't there be military action? Why wouldn't Iran go ahead and build a nuclear weapon, and then the United States either faces that, or something bad happens with Israel, or increased terrorist threats here?
Well, I think that the sanctions that were in place ought to go back in place. And make it clear to Iran that the world community is not going to accept their development of a nuclear weapon.
The Interior bill has been pulled from the House floor. Can you explain your thinking, why you did that, and what is the fate of this bill and this debate on the flag?
I told you, I believe it's time for some members to sit down and have a conversation about how to deal with this issue in a responsible way. Because I believe that members on both sides of the aisle want to deal with it in a responsible way.
Mr. Boehner, speaking of another issue that's a political football, you said for some time that your party needs to fix the broken immigration system. But members of your party, one after the other, have been denouncing the comments of Donald Trump, who's running for president, saying that all Mexicans are rapists. The party leader of your party had to call him yesterday and ask him to tone it down. What's your message to Donald Trump? And are you concerned about the impact that debate is having on your party?
Listen, I disagree with Mr. Trump's comments. And frankly, I think when you look at the presidential candidates, they've all pretty well made their position clear. This has become the biggest political football I've seen in my congressional career, this whole issue of illegal immigration and what to do about it. And as I said last week, it's not going to get resolved by Congress sticking their heads in the sand. And if we want to resolve issues like we see develop in San Francisco and elsewhere, we need to get serious about enforcing the laws we have. And if we don't like the laws we have, then we need, as a Congress, to sit down and resolve this issue. And I'd like to get it resolved sooner rather than later.
So, Mr. Speaker, following up on that, will the House act on any immigration-related legislation this year?
I would hope so.
Like what?
I would hope so.
The conversation that you were talking about regarding the flag, does that extend to any of the resolutions introduced by members? The committees that they've been sent to have no immediate plans to hold any hearings?
I just think that we ought to address this in a fairly broad way, and I've got a pretty good idea of the kind of members who ought to be a part of that conversation.
But, Mr. Speaker, are you saying that, will there be a vote on the Calvert Amendment, or is that what you're going to discuss?
No, that bill is going to sit in abeyance until we can come to some resolution on this. Thanks, everybody.